Macca's Guides.
Hey guys, Macca here with my top 10 hardest gaming completions of 2017. This is a yearly series where I count down the hardest and the longest games of the year. A couple of quick housekeeping rules before we get started. Rule number 1 is that the game must have come out in 2017. Rule number 2 is that we are ignoring DLC packs as they're quite complex and there's so much variation between them. So things like the Gears of War recent update won't be up for discussion in this video. Rule number 3 is that we will be ignoring extremely obscure titles because there's not enough of a player base to give an accurate representation of how hard they actually are. I don't want to be including them and then putting them in the wrong spot in the list, so like super underground titles won't be included. And for rule number 4, you guys are always interested in how I determine this list. For this year's list, I've decided that the rankings are dependent on 80% skill and 20% time or length to complete that game. This should allow games that are very hard but kind of short a chance on the list, but also showcase some games that are just ridiculously long. Now, kudos to you if you've completed any of these games. Before we get started, I did want to quickly rank numbers 15 through to 11, and then we'll go into the top 10 and discuss each game individually. In the number 15 spot, I have Race the Sun. In the 14th spot, I have Ruiner. In 13, I have The Sun and the Moon. In 12th, I have Thumper. And in 11th, I have Mr. Shifty. You guys were almost the hardest games of the year, but not quite hard enough. Let's get into the top 10. Now, in at the number 10 spot in the list, I have Cuphead, the only game on the list that I've personally completed. And it's one of those games that isn't that long, but it does take a significant amount of skill to complete because there are a lot of different ways you'll need to play the game, and the game is known for being difficult in the first place. If you're looking to get the completion in Cuphead, you'll start by beating the game on normal, and then you'll want to probably spend some time revisiting the bosses and getting an A rank on all of them, and also making sure you grab all of the coins from the run and gun levels to purchase all of the items in the shop. Then you're ready to take on some 0-point achievements, which are a little bit difficult. Some of them include playing the game in a pacifistic way, or beating certain bosses without getting hit, or even completing a plane section using only the mini plane. Once all of that is out of the way, you have to complete the game yet again on Expert. Although this isn't impossible by any means, and it definitely helps that Cuphead is a great game, so it doesn't feel as much of a chore, it is still pretty difficult, and most gamers aren't going to get that second leg or that extra little bit of skill needed to complete the game on Expert, which is why it starts our list off at number 10, although it didn't really have much of a chance higher up on the list compared to some of these other games. Now, in at the number 9 spot, I have Outlast 2, which was actually a little bit easier to complete when it originally came out, but they've made some updates to make it a little bit harder in recent months. Now, to get the completion, you'll start off with a completely reasonable playthrough where you want to beat the game, grab all the collectibles, and unlock the higher difficulties. But then it gets a little bit harder. At some point, you'll also need to beat the game in under 4 hours, which is a pretty serious undertaking. You'll need to memorize most of the game in order to do so. Then, at that point, it's time to start raising the bar in terms of difficulty. You'll have to play the game on not only hard, not only nightmare, and not only insane mode, but you'll actually have to finish the entire game on insane mode without reloading the camera battery. And let me explain that a little bit further for those who don't know what it means. Alright, so let's start with Nightmare difficulty as a foundation of explanation. It's the hardest difficulty in the game. Enemies are super aggressive, they're super quick, and they are super observant of their surroundings. Not only that, when they hit you very hard, and it is very hard to survive once you're found out. Now we're going to take that a step higher and move on to Insane, which is basically taking Nightmare difficulty and completely removing checkpoints and saving. You'll have to do the entire game in one sitting, and if you die, you have to restart the entire game. So imagine being 2 or 3 hours into a game and then making a short mistake only to have to restart the entire thing. Now on top of that, let's add the layer of not reloading your camera batteries. For those of you who have played the game, you know it's an extremely dark game, and the camera batteries are often used in order to get night vision so you can see around corners and move around the map more easily. Without batteries in your camera, however, most of the game will be done in complete pitch black darkness. You will not be able to see literally anything. There are no tricks here either. You can't turn up the brightness on your TV or do any type of like video magic in order to get something to appear on your screen. The game is quite literally just going to be a black screen for a majority of your playthrough, and you'll have to memorize turn by turn each section of the game in order to complete these parts specifically. However, if you do, you will be granted with the Messiah achievement / trophy for finishing the game on insane mode without reloading the camera battery, an achievement or trophy to be very proud of, but also one that places this game at the number 9 spot on our list here today. In at the number 8 spot, we have our first test of patience and endurance, and that is Gigantic, taking many players over 1,000 hours to complete, while also having some very difficult achievements to boot. Now, a lot of the list in Gigantic is pretty basic stuff. You'll have to earn some badges in online games, you'll have to rank up your individual characters, and rank up your overall account. Most of that's going to happen through regular progression, and the final kind of tier here is level 100 for your account, which very few players will reach, although that's more of a time commitment than anything. Now, on top of that, though, you'll need to earn a double kill, a triple kill, a quadra kill, and also the extremely rare pentakill, where you kill 5 enemies within a few seconds of each other, and this is an extremely rare occurrence in a game like Gigantic. And because this is pretty much an online-only game and there's already an established community of gamers here, you can't just kind of run in and get lucky. You'll have to actually take the time to get really good at the game in order to dream of getting your first pentakill. However, if this game is up your alley, you can start playing it completely for free and then buy future characters if you want, but you don't have to. So there's nothing really holding you back from being the 4th person in the world to finish off Gigantic. Next up, in the number 7 spot on the list, we have Cities Skylines, which is a game that I've personally played for about 20 hours and have about 140 gamer score out of the total 1,000. In order to get 1,000 gamer score in this game, you'll need to make a whole bunch of different cities with different goals. For some cities, you'll have the goal of having an extremely high population while also having an extremely high tax rate, while for others, you'll try to have a lot of abandoned buildings at the same time, or a really high crime rate, for example. While another achievement might ask you to keep the overall happiness of your citizens above 95% for over 2 years. Now, that may seem like an easy task, but it's actually easily one of the hardest. Additionally, what you'll need to do is unlock all of the monuments in the game. Each monument can take anywhere from 10 to 15 hours individually, and you'll have to be very specific in the way you play to unlock each one. You really do have to become a little bit of a master at this game because it's not as easy as just following an achievement guide or following a couple of steps to success. You really have to be able to micromanage things as they come up, and every game will act a little bit differently and randomly, and you have to adapt to those certain factors. You'll eventually get your 1,000 out of 1,000 if you don't quit before you get there, though. Next up on the list, we have Vikings, Wolves of Midgard, which is an action RPG and requires you to play for probably a couple hundred hours, and also requires a decent chunk of skill during that time, which is why it ranks so highly on our list. Now, for this game, you'll need to complete it as either a warrior or a shieldman on your first playthrough. Then you'll have to do Game Plus mode and do the other class, and you'll have to complete basically everything in the game, whether it's finding all of the artifacts, completing every ruin, or completing all of the hunt maps. Once you do that, you're probably ready to also turn up the difficulty. You will have to complete the game on the hardest difficulty, but you can kind of do whatever you want here. If you die, it's not a huge deal, and you can kind of get there through brute force. Then you have to complete the game in Valhalla mode, which is a one death mode. However, you can change the difficulty to be pretty low in Valhalla mode, meaning that you can play the game on easy with 1 life. But then you need to combine those 2 playthroughs and play in Valhalla mode on the highest difficulty, aka beat the game on the hardest difficulty without dying, which is never an easy feat, but especially not easy in this game. Now, even with all of that, there's also some randomness and glitchiness when it comes to this game, unfortunately. So even with all that work, things might not unlock as they are supposed to. And that is the reason that there are only a handful of gamers who have completed this. Next on the list, we have Super Cloudbuilt, which is a game I spent a couple of hours streaming on my Twitch channel. This is a third-person speedrunning platform type game where everything's kind of based on the physics of the world, and there's a really high skill ceiling that you'll have to reach in order to start thinking about getting some of these achievements or trophies out of the way. Now, you'll start off by playing through the game and doing each of the levels, and as you complete the campaign, you'll unlock these levels as well as different variations of how you play those levels in ranked mode. There are time trials which require you to complete the levels in blazing fast times. There's pacifism mode, which requires that you don't use your gun against the enemies. There's Pathfinder mode, which requires you to use the least amount of boost possible. And there's fragile mode, which only allows you to get hit once. Now, all 4 of these modes are available for all of the levels, and you'll need to get an S rank for every level on every mode in order to grab all of the achievements or trophies, and that is absolutely no easy task. Looking at the leaderboards for this game, there are only a couple people maximum who have been able to do this. Now, on screen, you're actually watching my gameplay getting an S rank on one of the modes on the easiest level in the game. There's even an achievement for completing the tutorial in a very fast way, which took me almost an hour personally. If you're able to get all the achievements or trophies in this game, it's something you should be very proud of. Next up, we have Enter the Gungeon, which originally released in 2016, but then re-released this year on Switch and Xbox. I didn't consider it last year, so I figured I'd throw it into this year's video. Enter the Gungeon is a bullet hell dungeon crawler roguelike, and that genre alone is known for producing some of the hardest games ever made. Because of the genre, you can expect procedurally generated levels as well as permadeath, and every time you do a run, you're looking at something completely different from the run before it, meaning that it's really a test of skill and not really a test of strategy or necessarily a test of memorization. Now, in order to grab all the achievements or trophies out of this game, you will need to beat it, which is a feat of itself. You'll also need to do a couple of things that are going to be complete random rolls of the dice and have these rare occurrences come up in your game multiple times in order to give you the chances you need in order to successfully complete the objective. Not only that though, one of the kickers for this game is to collect 5 master rounds in one run. And what that means is that in one run, which usually consists of 5 or 6 chambers, you will need to do 5 bosses completely flawlessly, meaning you have to be a little bit of a god at this game. And even with the required skill to complete all of these challenges, you're still looking at a decent chunk of a grind, clocking in around 100 hours in order to get all those random things to spawn and enough bounties and stuff to get everything else out of the way. This game shares a lot of similarities with The Binding of Isaac, which was on our list 2 years ago. Because of that, they're both going to be on the list, and they're both going to be completed by a very small amount of people, and they will both require quite a bit of skill. In at the number 3 spot, we have an older game that was kind of recently re-released, and that is I Am Bread, a game where you control a piece of bread through a series of levels. That concept seems easy enough, but the game is very difficult, has very clunky controls somewhat on purpose, and it also has very tough challenges you'll need to complete, which all together make for an extremely difficult experience. If any of you remember that old internet game Quap, and then you mixed it with Octodad and you were a piece of bread, that would kind of be this game. You'll start off your completion by trying to complete the story, which is something that not a lot of players actually end up doing. After that, you'll have a whole bunch of miscellaneous tasks, most of which are very skill intensive, or require you to do a very specific thing that can be quite random or hard to do with the clunky controls in this game. However, after that, you'll have to end off by completing the level with an A++ grade on all of the levels, which is incredibly difficult because the speedrun times have very little room for error, and again, this game has very little room for solid controls. Not only are your times important in these A++ runs, but you'll also have to make sure you complete the levels with a high percentage of edibility, meaning that you have to avoid all of the major hazards in the level, some of which are going to be extremely difficult to avoid. And all of that paired together makes this game a very tough and very frustrating completion. Next off, the second hardest completion of 2017 is Fortnite. Now, we're all aware of Fortnite Battle Royale, which is actually completely free for people to play. However, all of the achievements and trophies in this game are related to Fortnite, aka Save the World, which is the original co-op mode that they released when the game first came out. Now, when you first start the game out, you'll be unlocking stuff at a pretty reasonable pace, especially if you're willing to pay real money in order to unlock some of the in-game microtransactions. But eventually you will reach somewhat of a wall where progression is severely limited by the amount of time you play the game. The longer you play, the more stuff you'll get and the easier it'll be to progress, but you'll have to repeat the same levels over and over. I imagine you guys can kind of see where I'm going. At approximately 1/3 of your way through the game, the grind becomes so hard and so tough and so long that most players are probably going to give up. But not only does the grind get really long, it also gets very difficult to complete the later levels. And because they're difficult, you may spend a lot of your resources on a level only to fail it and then have to re-grind in order to redo the level. You can kind of see that the time and the skill go hand in hand for this game. The longer you play, the less skill it takes, but there's still a significant amount of skill required, especially late in the game. For example, in the final Storm Shield defenses, you'll probably need one of the best co-op teams in the world. Now, another important note here is that the progression is somewhat related to individual people, even though it's a co-op game. And what that means is for some of the really difficult levels, if you want everyone in your squad to be progressing at the same time, you'll need to do some of the levels 4 times before you can move on. So not only do you need the skill to complete these levels, you need enough skill to do them 4 times and enough grinding to have the resources to do it each time successfully. However, there are a few more kickers that will get people really riled up here for the amount of time they'll need to commit. You will need to play a total of 1,000 Play with Others missions. A Play with Others mission is basically a random match-made game where you're thrown into a lobby to help other people and not progress your own story. A mission is at least 20 minutes, so this achievement alone could take you close to 300 hours. Then you'll need to fully explore 1,500 zones, meaning that out of those initial 1,000, you'll need to also add another 500 zones onto your games, and you'll need to fully explore all of those maps, which is something that you don't accidentally do. You'll need to spend about 20 to 30 minutes per level, making sure you have every speck of every map fully discovered. Then you'll need to build 500,000 structures in successful missions. That may seem like not that much, but it is quite a bit. You don't end up building more than 100 structures on average per mission, so this is something that's going to take a lot of grinding and a lot of resource farming during your playtime. Last but not least, you'll need to save 10,000 survivors in successful missions. On average, these types of missions have 8 survivors to save. You can imagine you'll have to do 1,000 survivor missions, and most missions are not survivor missions. So just those 4 achievements or trophies at the end basically add 1,000 hours to the end of your game, even after you do the really hard and long stuff. And those are the reasons that there are exactly 0 players who have completed this game. Last but not least, in the top spot for hardest game of 2017, we have Wolfenstein 2, the new Colossus. So in order to get the gaming completion in Wolfenstein 2, you'd probably start with a regular playthrough on one of the normal difficulties. During that playthrough, you'd probably be going for a majority of the collectibles, as well as some of the missable achievements or trophies. Now, after you complete the game, you may notice that you're missing a couple of collectibles and you might want to mop them up. However, the collectibles in this game are missable and you can't really checkpoint select your way through them, and they don't just save on the fly, which means that you will need a comprehensive collectible guide in order to get you through this game and make sure you grab every single thing along the way without missing anything in order to grab all of those as well. Alright, so at this point you've completed the game on one of the lower difficulties and you've obtained all 250 plus of the collectibles, and you've also attained some of the harder skill-based achievements and trophies sprinkled within the campaign. At this point, it's time to start turning up your difficulty levels, and why stop at one of the middle ones when there's an achievement for completing the game on the hardest difficulty named Mein Leben. That's what you're going to need to do in order to complete this game. At this point, you may be wondering what the Mein Leben difficulty actually entails. Well, you'll have to be playing the game against the hardest possible AI, and you'll also be taking quite a bit of damage, dying within usually 2 to 3 shots depending on if you have armor or not. However, on top of that, you'll also have to do the game in one sitting, and there are no saves or checkpoints. And if you die, you have to restart the entire 3 to 4 hour game. Also, for some reason, in Wolfenstein 2, they made the cutscenes 100% mandatory every time you play the game. Meaning, if you want to speedrun it, you will be forced to sit through those cinematics every time you play the game. Wolfenstein 2 on the hardest difficulty is already hard enough, but when you're adding in the fact that you only get 1 life, and the fact that there are no checkpoints, and the fact that you have to do it all in one sitting in a game that takes at least 3 to 4 hours, I think you're just asking for way too much for something that's supposed to be an achievement or a trophy in a game. And although there are right now about 7 to 20 people who have completed Mein Leben difficulty, there are a lot of players playing this game, meaning that it's still an incredibly small percentage of players who are able to do it. And for that reason, without a doubt, Wolfenstein 2 is going to be the hardest game of 2017. I've even seen petitions online asking for Bethesda to change this achievement or trophy to make it a little bit easier on players, although I don't think they're really going to budge at this point. And in fact, in one of their DLCs, they've already released yet another Mein Leben achievement or trophy for completing the DLC on that difficulty, although the DLC is significantly shorter, so it's going to be a lot easier. When I originally heard about this difficulty and saw this achievement or trophy, me and my friends actually had a small betting pool of how long it would take someone to unlock this achievement or trophy and whether anyone would actually be able to do it or not. Now, there are a lot of dedicated gamers out there attaining it right now. However, like I said before, it's still like a 1 in 10,000 people achievement. And for that reason, for this difficulty specifically, Wolfenstein 2 easily takes the top spot for 2017. And that's a wrap for the top 10 hardest gaming completions of 2017. If you have any constructive criticism or you think I may have missed a game, please leave a YouTube comment in the comments section down below. Now, if you enjoyed the video, please do drop a like. However, if you are more about easy games over hard games, I will be making a top 10 easiest gaming completions of 2017, where I count down the 20 easiest games, which will grant you 15,000 gamer score in about 15 hours. So check that out if you're interested. It'll be linked down below and also available on the YouTube channel. Again, thank you so much for watching. A special thanks to the amazing people on Patreon for supporting the show, and hopefully I see you guys next time. Peace.